There's no link yet. Okay. Do you want to turn the TV off in the other room? Hi, Mom. How are you? Okay. Do, do, do. All right, we're going to get started in just a minute. Okay. All right. We off at chapter 5. I've gotten a few little bits of critique, so I'm going to go a little slower. Hopefully, I won't stumble so much. Chapter 5. Oh, we are still reading The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. As I stood there musing over this too perfect triumph of man, the full moon, yellow and gibbous, came up out of an overflow of silver light in the northeast. The bright little figures ceased to move about below. A noiseless owl flitted by, and I shivered with the chill of the night. I determined to descend and find where I could sleep. I looked for the building I knew. Then my eye traveled along to the figure of the white sphinx upon this pedestal of bronze, growing distinct as the light of the rising moon grew brighter. I could see the silver birch against it. There was the tangle of rhododendron bushes, black in the pale light, and there was the little lawn. I looked at the lawn again. A queer doubt chilled my complacency. No, said I stoutly to myself, that was not the lawn. But it was the lawn, for the white, leprous face of the Sphinx was towards it. Can you imagine what I felt as this conviction came home to me? But you cannot. The time machine was gone. I will read to you anytime you want, Mom. I'm a little jealous about your wine. Is it red or white? Um, at once, like a lash across the face, came the possibility of losing my own age, of being left helpless in this strange new world. The bare thought of it was an actual physical sensation. I could feel it grip me at the throat and stop my breathing. In another moment I was in a passion of fear and running with great leaping strides down the slope. Once I fell headlong and cut my face. I lost no time in staunching the blood, but jumped up and ran on, with a warm trickle down my cheek and chin. All the time I ran I was saying to myself, they have moved it a little, pushed it under the bushes out of the way. Nevertheless, I ran with all my might, all the time with the certainty that sometimes comes with excessive dread. I knew that such assurances was folly, knew instinctively that the machine was removed out of my reach. My breath came with pain. I suppose I covered the whole distance from the hill crest to the little lawn, 2 miles perhaps in 10 minutes. And I am not a young man. I cursed aloud as I ran, at my confident folly in leaving the machine, wasting good breath thereby. I cried aloud and none answered. Not a creature seemed to be stirring in that moonlit world. Oh, the last bit of the Josh. Aw, I have more over here if you need it. When I reached the lawn, my worst fears were realized. Not a trace of the thing was to be seen. I felt faint and cold when I faced the empty space among the black tangle of bushes. I ran around it furiously, as if the thing might be hidden in a corner, and then stopped abruptly with my hands clutching my hair. Above me towered the Sphinx upon the bronze pedestal, white, shining, leprous, in the light of the rising moon. It seemed to smile in mockery of my dismay. I might have consoled myself by imagining the little people put had put the mechanism in some sort of shelter for me, had I not felt assured of their physical and intellectual inadequacy. That is what dismayed me, the sense of some hitherto unsuspected power, through whose intervention my invention was vanished. Had for one thing I felt assured, unless some other age had produced its exact duplicate, the machine could not have moved in time. The attachment of the levers, I will show you the method later, prevented any one from tampering with it in that way. Oh, I've got a new follower. Agilities. Ooh, I like that. Yet for one thing I felt assured, unless some other age had produced its exact duplicate, the machine could not have moved in time. The attachment of the levers, I will show you the method later, prevented anyone from tampering with it in that way when they were removed. I had moved and was hid only in space. But then where could it be? Sorry if I'm getting a little static. Do I need to move the mic, Bobby? The box and the... Okay. All right, hold on. Better? Nope, worse. Okay. Does it need to be closer to me? Better or worse? Okay. So the receiver probably has to be closer. That sounds good, or am I still staticky? I can try clipping it to my dress. Do you think that would help? Nope. What channel? Oh, it's back. I don't know. The power button. Is it just maybe a assistant? Oops, it's back. Hi, Higgins. Hello. How are you? Figure out who that is. Chris too. Is it Chris? You have a. Oh, hey. Can everyone hear me? Is it the? Am I leaning on the wire? Is that making it worse? You are not an audio engineer. We do know an engineer. I might need your help. How soon can you get here?
Totally different engineer.
Engineers are multifaceted and multi-talented persons. All right, let's see if that's a little better. All right. I think I must have had a kind of frenzy. I remember running violently in and out among the moonlit bushes all around the Sphinx, and startling some white animal that in the dim light I took for a small deer. Ooh, hi Hexane Baker. Ooh, what do you like to bake? I ate dinner, but I didn't have anything sweet yet. Oh, also hi if your name is just Baker. I've got food on the mind most of the time. I remember too late that night beating the bushes with my clenched fist until my knuckles were gashed and bleeding from the broken twigs. Then, sobbing and raving in my anguish of mind, I went down to the great building of stone. The big hall was dark, silent, and deserted. I slipped on the uneven floor and fell over one of the malachite tables, almost breaking my shin. I lit a match and went on past the dusty curtains, of which I have told you. There I found a second great hall covered with cushions, upon which perhaps a score or so of the little people were sleeping. I have no doubt they found my second appearance strange enough, coming suddenly out of the quiet darkness with inarticulate noise and the sputter and flare of a match, for they had forgotten about matches. Where is my time machine? I began, bawling like an angry child, laying hands upon them and shaking them up together. It must have been very queer to them. Some laughed, most of them looked sorely frightened. When I saw them standing around me, it came into my head that I was doing as foolish a thing as it was possible for me to do under the circumstances, in trying to revive the sensation of fear. For reasoning from their daylight behavior, I thought that fear must be forgotten. Abruptly, I dashed down the match, and knocking one of the people over in my course, went blundering across the big dining hall again, out under the moonlight. I heard cries of terror and their little feet running and stumbling this way and that. I do not remember all I did as the moon crept up the sky. I suppose it was the unexpected nature of my loss that maddened me. I felt hopelessly cut off from my own kind, a strange animal in an unknown world. I must have raved to and fro, screaming and crying upon God and fate. I have a memory of horrible fatigue, as the long night of despair wore away, of looking in this impossible place and that, of groping among moonlit ruins, and touching strange creatures in the black shadows, at last of lying on the ground near the Sphinx and weeping, with absolute wretchedness. I had nothing left but misery. Then I slept, and when I woke again it was full day, and a couple of sparrows were hopping around me on the turf within reach of my arm. Oh, Howard Goblin Wells is one of my favorite writers too. We should come up with a list of authors that use only initials and recast them as we see fit. All right, there's a lot of R's in the sci-fi world. Can we think of some good substitutions for Tolkien? Or, oh my gosh, I'm not going to remember who wrote Game of Thrones. Martin. Trying to think of some other ones. Why the two of them are the only two I can come up with right now. All right, I'm putting the list on you. How many authors can you think of that use only abbreviated letters for first or middle names? Ron. Ron. It's a good R. What if it was just J. Ron Tolkien? Oh, L. I thought we were subbing all the R's for our sci-fi writers with just Ron. George Ron Martin. Perfect. All right. Oh, see, C.S. Lewis. That's kind of in the sci-fi fantasy world too. A.D. Pond. Ooh, L.M. Montgomery's a good one. See, there's a lot of them. All right. So if I ever become an author, I really don't know how people will use my abbreviated initials, but I hope. Oh yeah, Mom. I know my mom has always used her initials too. I don't know if you've had any great collected works for me to read, but if they're in the public domain, Mom, I absolutely will. S.P. Blanchard. Stephanie! We already know what the S stands for. R is always Ron. H.Z. Barrel. I always wonder if these are jokes like Amanda Hugging Kiss. Henceforth, all R's are Rons. My new middle name. Sorry, you guys can't call me Reading Rosie anymore. I'm Reading Ron. Oh, you guys are always so sweet. All right. Speaking of reading, I'm going to do a little bit more of it as soon as I find it where I left off. All right. I sat up in the freshness of the morning, trying to remember how I had gotten there and why I had such a profound sense of desertion and despair. Then things came clear in my mind. With the plain, reasonable daylight, I could look my circumstances fairly in the face. I saw the wild folly of frenzy overnight, and I could reason with myself. Suppose the worst, I said. Suppose the machine altogether lost, perhaps destroyed. It behooves me to be calm and patient, to learn the way of the people, to get a clear idea of the method of my loss, and the means of getting materials and tools, so that in the end, perhaps, I may make another. That would be my only hope, perhaps, but better than despair, and after all, it was a beautiful and curious world. But probably the machine had only been taken away. Still, I must be calm and patient, find its hiding place and recover it by force or cunning. And with that I scrambled to my feet and looked about me, wondering where I could bathe. I felt weary, stiff, and travel-soiled. The freshness of the morning made me desire an equal freshness. I had exhausted my emotion. Indeed, as I went about my business, I found myself wondering at my intense excitement overnight. I made a careful examination of the ground about the little lawn. I wasted some time in futile questionings, conveyed as well as I was able to such of the little gesture, I'm sorry, questionings conveyed as well as I was able to such of the little peoples as came by. They all failed to understand my gestures. Some were simply stolid. Some thought it was a jest and laughed at me. I had the hardest task in the world to keep my hands off their pretty laughing faces. It was a foolish impulse, but the devil begot of fear and blind anger was ill curbed and still eager to take advantage of my perplexity. The turf gave better counsel. I found a groove ripped in it, about midway between the pedestal of the Sphinx and the mark of my feet where, on arrival, I had struggled with the overturned machine. There were other signs of removal about, with queer, narrow footprints like those I could imagine made by a sloth. Favorite animal. This directed my closer attention to the pedestal. It was, as I thought I have said, of bronze. It was not a mere block, but highly decorated with deep framed panels on either side. I went and rapped at these. The pedestal was hollow. Examining the panels with care, I found them discontinuous with the frames. There were no handles or keyholes, but possibly the panels, if they were doors as I supposed, opened from within. It took no great mental effort to infer that my time machine was inside that pedestal. But how it got there was a different problem. I saw the heads of two orange-clad people coming through the bushes and under some blossom-covered apple trees towards me. I turned smiling to them and beckoned them to me. They came and then pointed to the bronze pedestal. I tried to intimate my wish to open it, but at my first gesture towards this they behaved very oddly. I don't know how to convey their expression to you. Suppose you were to use a grossly improper gesture to a delicate-minded woman, it is how she would look. They went off as if they had received the last possible insult. I tried a sweet-looking little chap in white next, with exactly the same result. Somehow his manner made me feel ashamed of myself. But as you know, I wanted the time machine, and I tried him once more. As he turned off like the others, my temper got the better of me. In 3 strides I was after him, had him by the loose part of his robe round the neck, and began dragging him towards the Sphinx. Then I saw the horror of repugnance on his face, and all of a sudden I let him go. But I was not beaten yet. I banged with my fist at the bronze panels. I thought I heard something stir inside. To be explicit, I thought I heard a sound like a chuckle, but I must have been mistaken. Then I got a big pebble from the river and came and hammered till I had flattened a coil in the decorations, and the verdigris came off in powdery flakes. The delicate little people must have heard me hammering in gusty outbreaks a mile away on either hand, but nothing came of it. I saw a crowd of them upon the slopes, looking furtively at me. At last, hot and tired, I sat down to watch the place, but I was too restless to watch long. I am too occidental for a long vigil. I could work at a problem for years, but to wait inactive for 24 hours, that is another matter. I got up after a time and began walking aimlessly through the bushes toward the hill again. Patience, I said to myself. If you want your machine again, you must leave that sphinx alone. If they mean to take your machine away, it's little good you are wrecking their bronze panels, and if they don't, you will get it back as soon as you can ask for it. To sit among all those unknown things before a puzzle like that is hopeless. That way lies Manomania. Face this world, learn its ways, watch it. Be careful of too hasty guesses at its meaning. In the end, you will find clues to it all. Then suddenly the humor of the situation came into my mind. The thought of the years I had spent in study and toil to get to the future age, and now my passion of anxiety to get out of it. I had made myself the most complicated and the most hopeless trap that ever a man devised. Although it was at my own expense, I could not help myself. I laughed aloud. Going through the big palace, it seemed to me that the little people avoided me. It may have been my fancy, or it may have had something to do with my hammering at the gates of bronze. Yet I felt tolerably sure of the avoidance. I was careful, however, to show no concern and to abstain from any pursuit of them. And in the course of a day or two, things got back to the old footing. I made what progress I could in the language, and in addition, I pushed my exploration here and there. Either I missed some subtle point of their language, or their language was excessively simple, almost exclusively composed of concrete, substantive, and verbs. There seemed to be few, if any, abstract terms, or little use of figurative language. Their sentences were usually simple and of two words, and I failed to convey or understand any but the simplest propositions. I determined to put the thought of my time machine and the mystery of the bronze door under the Sphinx as much as possible in a corner of memory, until my growing knowledge would lead me back to them in a natural way. Yet a certain feeling, you may understand, tethered me in a circle of a few miles round the point of my arrival. So far as I could see, all the world displayed the same exuberant richness of the Thames Valley. From every hill I climbed, I saw the same abundance of splendid buildings, endlessly varied in material and style, the same clustering thickets of evergreens, the same blossom-laden trees and tree ferns. Here and there water shone like silver, and beyond, the land rose into blue undulating hills, and so faded into the serenity of the sky. A peculiar feature, which presently attracted my attention, was the presence of certain circular wells, several, as it seemed to me, of a very great depth. One lay by the path up the hill, which I had followed during my first walk. Like the others, it was rimmed with bronze, curiously wrought and protected by a little cupola from the rain. Sitting by the side of these wells and peering down into the shafted darkness, I could see no gleam of water, nor could I start any reflection of a lighted match. But in all of them I heard a certain sound, a thud, 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 like the beating of some big engine, and I discovered, from the flaring of my matches, that a steady current of air set down the shafts. Further, I threw a scrap of paper into the throat of one, and instead of fluttering down slowly, it was at once sucked swiftly out of sight. After a time, too, I came to connect these wells with tall towers standing here and there upon the slopes, for above them there was often just such a flicker in the air as one sees on a hot summer day above a sun-scorched beach. Putting things together, I reached a strong suggestion of an extensive system of subterranean ventilation, whose true import it was difficult to imagine. I was at first inclined to associate it with the sanitary apparatus of these people. It was an obvious conclusion, but it was absolutely wrong. Never a toilet. And here I must admit that I learned very little of drains and bells and modes of conveyance, and the like conveniences during my time in this real future. In some of these visions of utopias and coming times which I have read, there is a vast amount of detail about building and social arrangements and so forth. But while such details are easy enough to obtain, when the whole world is contained in one's imagination, they are altogether inaccessible to a real traveler amid such realities as I found here. Conceive the tale of London which a Negro fresh from Central Africa would take back to his tribe. What would he know of railway companies, of social movements, of telephone and telegraph wires, of the parcel delivery company and postal orders and the like? Yet we at least should be willing enough to explain these things to him. And even of what he knew, how much could he make his untraveled friend either apprehend or believe? Then, think how narrow that gap between a Negro and a white man of our own times, and how wide the interval between myself and these of the Golden Age. I was sensible of much which was unseen, and which contributed to my comfort, but save for a general impression of automatic organization, I fear I can convey very little of the difference to your mind.